Hello, Salt Strong Nation. Joe Simon's like Diamond's back again, and we're talking about how this fisherman went from being laughed at to respected. And if you're looking for another guest for someone for Luke and I to interview, there will not be anyone because that person who was laughed at was none other than my brother Luke. You know, it might sound crazy, but yeah, there was a time where he had some trouble consistently catching fish, and he even had a moment at his office where he was literally laughed at, and Bob in accounting was catching fish in a weekend. He spent the whole time, and we're going to go into that story. And then even when he started entering tournaments and was kind of figuring it out, I remember, Luke, there was a time you're up on stage and and this should be your moment of glory. And the guy asked if you worked the night shift because you were so pale, because all the other guides, were out in the water in the sun all the time. And Luke, was working crazy hours at a job, but that was when it all started coming together. So
that was the best compliment he could have given me. The corporate guy competing with the guides. So that was when I finally turned the corner.
And I had skin cancer, so our whole family, we've all been pretty careful and put some of that white zinc on. So Luke looked like a ghost up there, and the guy's like, "Boy, you worked a night shift or something."
Yeah, he literally said that when I was on stage, because I was the only one without the raccoon eyes. Right, everybody's out there fishing all day long, like hardcore fishing in the middle of the summer. It's just hot and it's just rough. And yeah, I came in there looking all just white skinned, and but I was handed a check, right? We're in the money, and so again, I'll gladly take a little backhanded slap while picking up some money on a fishing tournament.
Yep. So let's go way back and talk about you and I grew up fishing, something we always loved doing. You got really good at bass fishing, and then there's that transition from freshwater, mostly catching bass and in the lakes. We lived in Central Florida, so all of a sudden trying to catch redfish and speckled trout. Now you're dealing with tides and a lot more wind in many cases, and it looks different, right? Things are different. These fish behave a little bit differently. They move around more than bass. They're not as predictable. It turns out they are pretty predictable once you kind of know a few things. But in the beginning, it seems like Alice in Wonderland. You're just kind of lost, and it's new things popping up every day. So kind of talk about that, and we even kind of maybe go into that story of the office, I guess, event where you were kind of laughed at. That was kind of one of those like pivotal moments where you're like, all right, you know what, I'm going to figure this thing out.
Yeah, and I think really the biggest problem that I had, I was just a super bass addict. I love bass fishing. Very blessed to have grown up on a lake. We moved on a lake when I was like 11. And at that point, I already liked fishing, and then it just skyrocketed once I just had access to it in the backyard. And so got good at bass fishing just because I loved it and I did it all the time. And then we started making some trips over to like Tampa Bay and Charlotte Harbor, and even some on the East Coast as well, trying to catch, just anything. Right. And we really struggled. Like we were catching like ladyfish and get some shrimp and catch sheepshead like on the trestles down there at like by Boca Grande area. Yep. So that was pretty consistent. But as far as catching, really wanted to catch redfish, snook, and trout. And we really, really struggled with it for a long time. I think part of it was with bass, it was really about using lures. So got proficient using lures for bass. And I was just always told, and most people were doing, just that I knew at least, we're doing live bait for saltwater. So pretty much nothing that I was doing with bass fishing applied to saltwater. So I was learning everything. Like I had to figure out the tides, kind of where fish generally are, while also having to go catch bait and then keep the bait alive and get lighter tackles so that I can cast those little small bait fish without slinging them off. Just a lot of hurdles that really I think could have been, a lot of them could have been just totally bypassed had I just actually taken the lures I was using for bass fishing that would still mimic something in saltwater and just using those. Had I done that, I would have shaved years of frustration off. And that's eventually what I did when I started getting a kind of a feel and getting some success. So I'll say that the top level view, that was really the biggest thing. And also I didn't really study fish. I would just go out there and just do it. Like we would just go and bring the boat out, me, Dad, Joe, and whoever else, and just go out there and fish without really doing much pre-trip planning, and really no pre-trip planning. We just look at the tides and we had like 5 or 6 spots that, we caught some decent fish at, but it just wasn't consistent. And we really didn't have a method for our madness as far as spot selection. It was just like, hey, let's go try this one out. And then, okay, this one didn't work. Let's try the other one. And it was way tougher than it should have been, long story short.
Yep. And then you moved over to the East Coast, right? And that was kind of a whole new chapter. So we had some good days on the West Coast of Florida. We had access to a place in Port Charlotte we could go to pretty much whenever we wanted. We spent time in Tampa and really all over the place, even Marco Island, quite a bit. And then Luke, you move over to the East Coast. And so talk about that. Now you're trying to figure that out. Don't really have any friends, lonely,
so that's
scared.
Yeah. You moved. I knew nobody. So I didn't know a single soul within like an hour drive of there. And also I didn't have a boat. So before I'd had access to the family boat. Our dad was very, very nice and it would just let us go grab the boat and take it off to a trip when we wanted. And so I moved to Melbourne. I have no boat. And so now I couldn't do this live bait stuff that I was really diehard trying to figure out how to do. Like I literally had a 12-foot cast net, I had a 9-inch 12-foot cast net at like different mesh sizes. Like I was like a diehard live bait guy, and had some great days, but had way more bad days than good days. So it wasn't that I was catching nothing. It was my average, my daily, daily average was all over the place. It wasn't very good. So anyhow, so I move over to Melbourne, fishing the Indian River. I didn't have a boat. And so I had a little kayak, and that was the best thing that happened because now I didn't have the option to even mess with live bait. So I literally I just pulled this lure out because this is the one. I just went back to the old trusty. This is what I use bass fishing. This is a 5-inch jerk shad. It's a Zoom Super Fluke Alabama or Arkansas Shiner color on just one of these EWG, these worm hooks. And just rig it weedless and just targeting the shallows. And now I was covering a lot of water. I was totally focused on just paddling until I saw some fish or at least some activity. Then I would slow down and start casting this. And I started catching a bunch of fish. Like I actually started getting pretty good. I was getting a lot of really big trout. Indian River at that point had just beautiful grass, bait everywhere, and a bunch of giant trout. And those trout, like that, a lot of 24 to 26-inch trout were just slurping this lure down. Also catching a lot of good redfish and snook, but it really started clicking when I started focusing on covering water and just looking for signs of life and using my eyes more than anything, because there's not a lot of tidal flow either. So it was really about just going out there and finding the fish. And over time, I started realizing trends on the types of spots that were holding fish throughout the seasons, because I was going all the time. I just always had a fishing addiction. Even, go out with friends, I wouldn't be the one that would close down the bars. I would bail out early, get up at 5 a.m. I'm taking the kayak and I'm going fishing. So
when did this whole office thing happen then?
What's up?
When did this whole office thing happen?
Yeah, so that was a ways into it. I worked over there for, I guess, 7 years total. And so I was fishing all the time. I'll go every weekend. So pretty much everybody I worked with knew that I was fishing a lot. And I took pride in it, right? Like it was my favorite thing to do, favorite passion. And I was starting to actually get pretty good. Still not super consistent, but I was, getting respectable fish on a pretty consistent basis. And so I thought that I was like, really was top of the line. And I remember, I still remember it. I had one of those days where the weather was beautiful and like everything should have been good. And I just flat out fell on my face and I don't think I caught anything. I maybe would have caught like some ladyfish. And I remember going into work and that would happen, right? That would happen, I say maybe 50% of the time. But I go in the office and I like everybody's like, "Oh, the weather was awesome. You must have been fishing, right, Luke?"
So this is after the weekend of you.
Yeah, after the weekend. So the Monday morning meeting.
And you're fishing like all day, like because remember back then we didn't have kids and busy. Like it was like, hey, I would fish for 8 hours straight.
Oh yeah, fishing then. Yeah, it was at least 6+ hour trip, right? And so I was out there, and at that point I had a boat too. So at this point I had a Carolina skiff. So I upgraded to a boat. And that really didn't help me at all. That didn't help my fish catching much at all because I was just still doing the same stuff. And I still didn't have the actual trends dialed in. I was still kind of winging it, but starting to put the pieces together. So anyhow, I thought I had full confidence and I was, wanted to sound smart in front of everybody when they asked how the trip was. And I just couldn't lie to them and say I caught a ton of fish because I didn't have any pictures to back it up with. And I was like, yeah, the bite was really bad. I think the barometric pressure, I made some excuse that could have been possible. I don't know, probably wasn't, but I thought it would at least have a good excuse for why I failed. And so that was everybody. Okay, that's a bummer, but at least it was nice weather, And then it wasn't Bob. You said Bob. It was Steve. And so then later, Steve and a lot of the same group is later that day. A lot of the same group is in there, and Steve was showing all these pictures of these giant redfish that he caught that same weekend while I was on the water, and I had a terrible excuse, a made up excuse really, on why I failed. And he just totally, like, he basically looked. I don't know if people put two and two together and like really like, oh my gosh, like Luke really is terrible, but I felt that was what the case was. I really felt humiliated and just shamed on. I know it's kind of set, it's probably overthinking it, but I literally felt terrible. I was just mad. I was just like, what is he doing that I'm not doing? And that was really a driving point for me to actually start being more studious, if you will, or like tracking my reports. And I was like, okay, I have some good stuff going, but I've never had a day like what he just had. And he had like multiple bull redfish, big trout too, like crushed it, absolutely crushed it on the same day that I struggled and fish in the same general area. And so that was just a big, I would say a big motivator for me. Like if I'm going to be fishing all the time, like I need to actually hold my own on the office chatter about fishing. Can't let Steve from accounting beat me like that.
Dang you, Steve.
But it was the best thing that could happen to me. That really did kind of take me from just going out and just kind of lackadaisical fishing to actually like just being thoughtful and being purposeful, I should say, more than anything. So that was definitely like a point that I remember. Like I remember the feeling of it, just feeling like I'm sure my face was beet red. I just felt like such an idiot when he pulled out his phone and started showing. He was talking to my manager when he was showing the pictures, and I just felt like a chump.
It's interesting. I think, especially for men, we have the egos, and we've invested a lot of time and energy and money in boats and kayaks and stuff. And you want to catch fish, and you feel dumb when other people who know you love fishing ask you that question, and you don't like, hey, how'd it go this weekend? And you're like, oh, it was a exploration weekend. One of our members, I won't say his name, but I spoke to him recently, and he told me that was why he joined the club. Was he bought all the stuff. He had every piece of tackle you can imagine. And his neighbor would always ask him and always see him when he came back in the driveway. And at this point, had a real nice, $4,000 kayak and all the latest rods and reels and gear. And he's like, hey, how'd it go? And he never had a good reason. He's like, I'm literally lying to my neighbor, just, because I'm catching nothing. And I got so sick and tired of my doggone neighbor asking me how it went, because he'd always sit there watering his yard every time I come in. And I'm like, you know what? I kept seeing salt strung stuff, so I'm going to join him. And now he's catching a whole lot more fish. And he's like, all right, that was like, I wish I would have done that earlier. So if you're feeling the same, you're not alone. And we would love to have you and help you. But it is also interesting too, that I think as men, mostly, we're the guys who don't ask for directions, right? Because we want to figure it out ourselves. And we both did that. I mean, spent so much time, so much wasted time trying to do it through trial and error and trying to figure it ourselves. And looking back, I was like, man, I wish I would have just got a mentor, or, I wish there was a Salt Strong fishing club like there is today, to have all these shortcuts, right? To have someone just to get you from point A to point B so much faster. Now, of course, we have software and we have the 10-minute game plan every week. I mean, the stuff we do just on that Friday, if you just look at the software, the best time and day to fish and tide and all that software, and then watch the 10-minute game plan, like you're going to know more than 99% of all the weekend warriors out there. You'll have a massive advantage. So I'm glad you shared that part. So let's keep going on this story. So you're frustrated, you're ticked off, and you're doing okay. Like you mentioned earlier, you're catching fish. You had some nice trout, but it hadn't fully clicked yet. So like, what were some of the things that you did, and maybe looking back, what were the things that you could have redone, or like big lessons learned that really helped you leapfrog a lot of your friends? And even, you started competing with full-time guides and beating them. somewhat shortly after that. So that was a pretty pivotal moment. What did you learn?
Yeah, one was that I started thinking about equipment and just trying to just maximize everything. So at that point, I was still using mono. Like I was diehard mono for bass. I always used it. And then finally, it was my buddy Nick, one of my fishing partners, who I eventually started doing tournaments with later. He was using braid, and I just saw that he was just outcasting me, and I was okay. Like, that's a problem, right? I don't want to be. It's like on the tee box at golf. Like, you don't want to be the shortest drive, and so I switched over to light braid. And also started using weighted hooks. Like, instead of these just normal worm hooks without a weight on the shank, I started using weighted hooks, and that just helps have a keel to the lure where it's darting without doing any twists. And but most importantly though, it was human intelligence. So shortly after feeling humiliated, I just got into it. I was like, okay, I need to have some sort of way to challenge myself and to just evaluate how I'm doing. So I started doing tournaments. So I mentioned Nick before. Started fishing with him. Is like, hey, let's do some of these tournaments. There was a tournament series going on, and so at this point, we had the right equipment, we had the right lures, and we were getting pretty good about finding fish and catching like legit fish on a pretty consistent basis at this point. So this time, I graduated to, I'd say, more of closer to advanced. Like, we weren't getting skunked hardly at all, but still weren't crushing it. Like, still weren't like super consistent on catching slams. And started this tournament series, and a lot of full-time guides were in there, and so it was like the guides versus, because they have an advantage, right? They're on the water every day. And the weekend warriors, kind of, there was four of us, four teams that just kind of just different, all like, we all got along at the weigh-ins, and we just started just helping each other out, where, a lot of times work stuff would come up, so we couldn't pre-fish for the tournament. So we would all just kind of talk to each other and say, hey, like, here's the type of spots that the fish have been holding in, and here are the lures that they're feeding on. And so as we started doing that, now, like, at least one of us was on the leaderboard in the money every single tournament. In some cases, a majority of us. And that was when it really like skyrocketed, is the sharing of human intelligence on real-time information on what just happened, yesterday or the day before, or at least within the last 7 days. That was way more valuable than the long-term stuff, because I was actually keeping notes on like, I would actually print out tide charts and mark like what species I caught throughout the tide for every area that I fished, and I would sort them by month. Like, I was getting into it. But every year is so different weather-wise, it's kind of fluff. Like, there's really not much insight in that. What is super important though is the real-time human intelligence. It's not so much about trying to lock in the barometric pressure and this wind direction and this current flow hitting this type of point. It's really, okay, what type of spot have the fish been holding, and during what current period and current flow, and that is invaluable. And then obviously, what are they feeding on? And so that was the information that literally took us from just hoping to like even have one respectable fish for the tournament weigh-ins, to like, literally we were in the money for it wasn't half of them, but it was close. And it got to the point where we got invited to the final tournament, and we actually won that one. And so it went from just getting schooled by Steve in accounting to actually like legitimately competing with full-time guides. And that's how I met Peter Deeks, Captain Peter Deeks at those weigh-ins. We had the bigger trout. We had the biggest fish in the first tournament, but ours couldn't swim away, so it got donated, and it was a half-pound deduction. And so still remember that Peter Deeks beat me.
So you guys were in first place. Deeks was in second, but he jumped to one because your fish died.
Yeah, ours was 7.61 pounds. At that point, it was the biggest trout we ever caught. It was like the perfect thing. It was like the 10 minutes to weigh in, and we were close to one last spot.
It's a heavy trout, dude.
It was a big one, but his was 7.12, and so we had the half-pound deduction. I literally remember those numbers, and this was years ago. So we had the half-pound deduction. So his was 7.12. Now ours is 7.11, and that cost like $1,000. Such a bummer. But yeah, it was really surprising how fast the progression was when the human intelligence part was the focus, and not so much just going out there and trying to learn by repetition. But I hear it all the time, and I do my best to tell people not to do it, but it's just about spending more time in the water. That's just not the case at all. I was out there all the time, and literally for years. I lived in Melbourne I was there for seven years, and for the first 3 or 4, I was fishing super hard and just barely incrementally getting better, and then started just networking with other anglers in the area, and it just totally skyrocketed. Like, it was not even close, and it was to the point where, like, it was just so consistently good, with that intelligence that, I mean, I just wish I had GoPros at that point, because it was insane how many big trout we were catching.
And there's no coincidence that the main feature of our Salt Strong Insider Club with our 30,000 members is real-time human intelligence. I mean, that's what we do every single Friday. And it's Luke. I mean, the same guy that learned all of this kind of the hard way is curating what's happening. You mentioned earlier, I mean, hey, this is literally where you need to fish this weekend. Here's where the fish are holding. Here's the depth. Here's kind of fish they're feeding on the bait size. Like, here's where you want to be depending on the current. I mean, the people that watch it, they're like, okay, I get it. Like, this is awesome. And then on top of it, obviously we have the Smart Fishing Tide software. And then you have the whole rest of the community. I mean, it's been so cool to see how many members have become so active where they're in there every single day, because we have some hardcore anglers who are on the water every day, at least multiple times a week, and they're sharing what's working in their area, where they're finding bait, where they're catching fish, etc. It has been so cool. That whole network effect is so incredibly powerful. I love the fact that you said, you started in Melbourne there, you're fishing the lagoon, you had a kayak, you thought the answer was a boat, and you didn't become better at all. Maybe in many cases you probably came worse, because you're having to figure out new stuff and figuring out how to position and approach in a boat versus a kayak. And it's so true. I mean, you mentioned golf. If you give a kid who's never golfed, they're basically horrible, right? And no far along, they haven't practiced. But if you just say, oh yeah, my kid's horrible at golf, he's never practiced, but I'm just going to buy him all new clubs, that's just solve the problem. No, like, they need a coach. Just like we have fishing coaches, they need some training, they need some help. Just buying new stuff never solves the problem. It could be incremental, right? I mean, back in tennis days, I mean, you knew if you were playing with a nice composite, graphite racket versus like an old wooden racket. I mean, there's definitely a difference. New strings versus old string, you can tell a difference. But then again, if you're not experienced, you don't know. You're still a horrible player. So it just goes back to coaching, though. I mean, it's why we started Salt Strong. Was like, we want to create everything that we wish was around when we were frustrated, and have something for everyone, right? We do have newbies that come in. We have a lot of weekend warriors who are just inconsistent. We even have full-time guides who are going through and learning things. And of course, the discounts brings a lot of people in as well. Getting 20, now even 30% off on pretty much every product in our store. That does bring a lot of people in. And by the way, do you see that new discount page? If you current insiders, oh my gosh, like we've now formed some partnerships. We're not allowed to say who they are because this is all private. They don't want us talking about these discounts publicly because you can't get them anywhere else. But we got some pretty cool stuff on the discount page. So make sure when you're logged in, there's an actual when I'm not talking about the tackle store, you always get everything off that. I'm talking about you doing business direct with some of these bigger companies. You're now getting 20, even 30% off their items as well. Just leave it at that. Definitely check out that page.
And we have a lot more coming as well.
Some big names.
And speaking of tackle too, another lesson that I learned the hard way is that when I was struggling, I was blaming my tackle. So I was actually buying much more expensive gear back then than I am now. And now I've literally full-time fishing. Because I thought that, okay, like I just need a nicer reel, right? Like I'm not catching many fish I want. It's this $100 reel. Now I need to go get a $250 reel, and that'll solve my problem. And it didn't do anything. It just made me feel more humiliated because now I'm still getting skunked while having super expensive gear and then chatting with a guy at the boat ramp who has just terrible looking stuff, and he's holding up a bunch of big fish. So it's not the equipment. Yes, you need to get at least decent equipment, but it's not going to be something where you have to spend $500 to get your equipment. It's really just about getting in tune with the fish and knowing the trends and just going out there and knowing the types of spots to go seek out based on the conditions. We see this question all the time. Hey, I'm going to, pick a name, Jacksonville. Where should I fish? And if anybody answers that question without getting some clarity on like what day are you going to fish and what time of the day to see what the current flow is doing and what direction the wind's going, if you're picking your spots without at least considering the current flow and the wind direction and wind speed, it's just a guessing game. And so that's what most people do. It's okay, high tides here. Okay, let's go to this spot first. But without factoring in all that stuff, even just changing weather and fronts, like that's the stuff that it seems complex, for just when you first start thinking about it. But once you just kind of get used to putting the pieces of the puzzle together, it's really not bad at all. And that's a lot of the focus on the weekend game plans. It's just putting the pieces of the puzzle together on a weekly basis so that as the conditions change, you can continually see what kind of adjustments you need to make. And that I think is the most important overall part of just getting better at inshore fishing is just seeing that puzzle put together as many times as possible. And even on a daily basis now, we now have coaches throughout the entire Southeast, from Texas all the way up into to Georgia now. And so on a daily basis, you'll see scenarios where we'll go out fishing and we'll actually record the pre-trip plan. We'll get on Google Maps and talk about what the wind's doing, what the current flow is doing, what the latest trends have been, and then pick out our spots, and then we'll go fish those spots. And then at the end, we'll actually explain what worked and what didn't work, so that you can just actually visually see that puzzle being put together. So if you have time, you can go through all that, but a lot of people are busy, we know, so that Friday weekend game plan, that's the overall synopsis of everything, done in just 10 minutes. So those who have time constraints, just focus on it 10 minutes and get the high level info there.
Yep. That's awesome. Talk about just keeping it simple as well, right? I think that's another issue that people who are maybe new or just thinking, to your point, I need more expensive stuff. And that's fine. I mean, I like expensive gear. I like stuff that will last. But I've also found when I just keep it simple, like you challenged me and you challenged other people, like just take a paddle tail. Like that's the reason we sell so many slam shadies, because it flat out works and it's so consistent. And so I did that. I was like, all right, I'm going to go just absolutely own these fish with a paddle tail. Even if I don't at first, I'm going to figure it out and become an expert at this. And then it was a jerk shad. And I know you've upgraded since, that jerk shad you showed later. Now we have like Alabama leprechaun. We've kind of just keep refining stuff and finding things that work better over time. But just take a paddle tail, like take a 3.5, 3-inch, maybe 4-inch, depending on the time of year. Yeah. Like just Luke's holding it up. If you're watching, that's it. I mean, just right here. That's all you should throw. Because like even we went out yesterday, you guys will see this pretty soon for Freedom Boat Club. They want us to do a 3-part series for their members. They've had a lot of members who struggle, right? Because it is tough, fishing out of a boat for maybe the first time. If you're just getting to Freedom Boat Club and you got no troll motor, you got no power pole, and it can be a little bit intimidating. And so we said, all right, well, we're going to go film on one of their boats. So we literally got in one of their boats, didn't have any of our accessories or anything with us, and we just went out catch fish. And what do we use? The whole first part of the day, and we caught tons of fish.
All paddle tail.
Just a little slam shady paddle tail on both a weighted twist lock hook like that, the Haas hook, and then also on what I guess we had a jig head in the very beginning, a little bit deeper. That's it, and just kept using it and just kept flat out working.
Yeah. And so what I found, and thanks for mentioning that, is less is more. And so overall, the biggest lesson I learned once I moved over to the East Coast and had a just total clean slate, and I didn't have the option to live bait, is less is more, is the just perfect 1 or 2 lures and just spend time with them and just get used to actually, adjusting the retrieve based on the conditions and just generating strikes. And that is way more important than being good at using 100 lures. So just like totally perfect one. So what I started with was this jerkbait. This is something I use in bass fishing, and I supplied the same retrieve, like the twitch pause retrieves, to the inshore saltwater, and the redfish, snook, trout, even tarpon, they all reacted to it just like bass do. And so had I just done that without trying to do the whole live bait thing for several years, I would have been way ahead. And again, just focus on one lure. It doesn't have to be a certain lure. If I could do it all over again, I would absolutely agree with Joe, is that I would switch from the jerk bait style to this small paddle tail, because everything eats these. They're easier to use. The tail does a lot of the work. And so you can actually just do a cast and retrieve, and it's just works more consistently, more frequently. I still do use these jerk shads, but it's really just when it's super calm out, and I just, and like no vibrations can be had, or else the fish are all spooking off. So yeah, if you're only do one, if you keep it simple and you want to start getting better at finding fish and catching fish more consistently without live bait, this right here is really all you need. This one lure with a weighted hook for the shallows, and then this same lure with a jig head for deeper water. So here's the type of jig head. Same lure, just different rigging, and just rig based on depth coverage, and that's it. And something that'll work all season long. Big fish, small fish. I think we're up to 99 species, I believe, that have been reported, and it just flat out works. And it's easy.
Awesome. Let's talk about finding spots too. That part's so critical. And that is, as I mentioned, one of the main things we help out in the Insider Club every Friday, do a smart fishing game plan, 10 minutes or less. You don't have to sit there and watch 50 YouTube videos. It's 10 minutes or less every single Friday. You can listen to it or watch it on the way to the ramp or wherever you're going. And the 90-10 zone, it's something we've talked about, right, Luke? We've done webinars on it. And if you don't know what that means, it means that 90% of the feeding fish can be found in 10% of any area at any given time. And this is held true in freshwater and saltwater. There's been books written about it, and it's flat out true. Yeah, sometimes it might be 85-15, but it's really 90-10. I mean, if you look at a spot, we've taken the drone up and proven this. We see it time and time and time again. And one of the toughest parts after trying to read a map in, let's just say your office or at home, and you're like, oh, cool, I got a game plan. It all works. And all of a sudden you get out there and it's overwhelming, right? Things look different. It's bigger, right? Remember Dumb and Dumber? It looks like we're only got to go a couple inches, hundreds of miles. It looks different when you're actually on the water. And so the best thing to do with this 90-10 is maybe flip it on its head, because this is super helpful to me, because I used to get out there and like, I'm looking at 100%, right, in my peripheral vision, and I'm overwhelmed. I got oyster bar, I got stuff everywhere. So instead of just saying, all right, I got to find the 10, start eliminating stuff first. So, all right, this big bay, I know they're not going to be out there in the middle. I'm going to eliminate that whole area. Start eliminating stuff, and all of a sudden it's less overwhelming, right? Because now it's almost like you're taking all this stuff, this excess stuff off the plate, and now you're left with the bones, the stuff that you need to go out there and catch fish. And like, oh, cool, I basically down to this one little island, this mangrove area, this little channel, this one little cut, and an oyster bar. Those are gonna be the 3 places I fish. So I know that's a very simplistic, and we have all kinds of tutorials on this in the club, but it helped me so much to eliminate stuff, right? Where places I was 90% sure, maybe 100% sure there were not going to be a lot of fish, right? Because if you can find 1 or 2, there's usually going to be more. When we're talking about redfish and speckled trout and snook and flounder, it's not like, oh, there might be one over there. No, like you find the honey hole. The honey hole has lots of fish, not just one. And it's so crazy how much easier it works when you can focus on that every trip. When we talk about the 3 B's, right? The birds, bait, and boils. When you're on the water, also just be looking around. I noticed Luke is so good at that, and guides are really good at that, right? The people who are on the water every day, they're so good. You guys might be cruising with a guide. Maybe you've been on the boat with a guide before. You're cruising to a spot, and all of a sudden they just stop and they go back around like, oh, I just saw something over here. They're always looking. The rest of us are sitting on our phone and having a beer or whatever and chilling. I mean, they're always looking for mullet jumping, or we saw Spanish mackerel jumping out of the water. Man, stop. There's a school of them over there. I mean, stuff that a lot of people miss. You just gotta use your eyes. Any more thoughts there on the 90-10?
Yeah, I mean, and just I think the importance of knowing that is a true ratio is that most of the fish are in a small space, and so if you're guessing at it, or if you're just not on the water all the time and you're not getting some intelligence from anybody, the odds of picking a spot that's good is kind of small, right? It's most of the area doesn't have many fish. And I think the biggest mistake that people do, I see it all the time from new members who are, oh man, I've been struggling. And I'll be, hey, like, tell me about your last trip. Like what type of spots did you go to? And I hear it all the time is, oh, I was out there for 8-9 hours and I caught like 2 catfish. And I was like, well, like, how many spots did you go to? Is, oh, I went to 3 spots, like 3 spots in 9 hours, and you catch 3. Like, that's not good. Like, if you don't catch anything in the first 15 minutes, and especially if there's not signs of life, like birds or bait or just some sort of life, get up and go, right? It's a dead zone. And because statistically it is going to be a dead zone unless there are some things to put in your favor. And that's where, we have this finding spots mastery course that goes through what to look for on satellite maps as far as finding good structure, like, seagrass and rocks and oysters. But if it's just flat sand, it's pretty much guaranteed to be a dead zone. But even if there's good looking structure, it's not always going to be good, right? Fish have tails for a reason. They get up and move if the conditions aren't right for that particular spot. So just finding a spot with good structure that holds fish at some parts of the season or parts of the day or parts of the tide cycle is cool. But if they're not there at that given time, it's just better odds to pick up a move and go to another spot than to sit there and just hope and pray that some fish show up. And I think the sit here and pray until some fish show up is what a lot of people do. And it's just flat out not going to work most of the time. And so that's why I truly do recommend for people, because I wish I did it personally. I recommend for somebody newer to saltwater fishing, whether going out to redfish, sea trout, snook, flounder, doesn't matter, is to put away the live bait altogether and just focus on lures and focus on covering water and finding the fish and you hunting the fish down. Because when you do that, you're going to expose yourself to more territory, and it's going to increase the odds that you get yourself into that 10% zone where all the fish are. You'll do that more consistently. And if you can just get yourself there in that 10% zone, it doesn't matter really what you're using. In many cases, you can be, there's that one video, the guy put a hook on a set of pliers and threw it out. And it was just something shiny, and a redfish, it went up and ate it. So you don't have to have the perfect lure every time. It's really about finding the fish. So put the focus on finding the fish. That is the one lesson that I know I kind of probably heard it over the years, but I never really took it seriously. And that's the one thing that, had I taken it seriously, it would have shaved off years and years of frustration. And my back's all messed up from throwing that cast net so many times. So leave the cast net home, take out, again, just a simple paddle tail, have some rigged for the shallow water, meaning like 2.5 feet or less, and then some on jig heads for deeper water to cover the deeper ledges. And that's literally all that's needed. And then and just get out there and find the fish, and ideally join the club. That way you can see the weekend game plan to know the types of spots that are most likely going to be holding fish throughout the day and throughout the tide cycle.
Yep. And these on the water reports, we talked about this before I've talked about it in the past, and I think they're one of the most important things. One is to find the fish. You talked about it, but 2 is to watch someone else good, a pro, like a coach, find the fish, right? I mean, just like if you're in a golf or if you're in a tennis, to watch someone's form, to watch how they're doing, watch how they're playing, to watch how they beat someone, you learn from that every single time. And so every day, literally Monday through Friday, 5 times a week, we have one of our pro fishing coaches fishes a brand new spot and shows everything from why they picked that spot, the pre-trip planning part of it using maps, and then the on the water part, where they caught fish, where they missed fish, lessons learned, and then almost like a game film, like a post-trip analysis, where they talk about everything they learned, maybe things they would have done differently. It's so valuable. I mean, I see the comments that come in on those, and they're just like, holy smokes, like, this is so helpful. I'm about to go fish that spot this coming weekend, or like, man, this is game changing, or hey, I'm fishing a spot just like this in my area. So powerful. We're doing them all over the place. We got Pat literally riding around the country in his RV. I think he's in Mississippi right now, filming reports, just left Texas and Louisiana and just kind of moving all the way up to Virginia and wide over there in Texas. So these things are happening every single day now, and only Insider Club members get that. This is the stuff that you will not see on YouTube. So if you're watching this on YouTube, this is our free stuff. This is what we basically give out there to the public to give goodwill, to bring people into the club, if you want to know our business model. So that's it. And we always try to, bring some value on these things. And this was fun because it's a story that hasn't really been told a lot. I think, is small business owners. Luke and I started this 7 years ago, and we used to tell the story a lot because it was very fresh and new to us. And we're like, yeah, this is everything that we wish we would have had when we were really struggling. And now I think a lot of people tend to forget that you struggled, right? Even like that bridge fishing podcast with Hollywood, they're like, man, like Luke could catch a fish anywhere. I was like, yeah, but a lot of people don't know it. At one point, it wasn't like that. This club really was birthed because it was something that was important to us, something that was like a pain point for us personally. So just know that you're not alone if you're having a tough time, and you got people like us, and now peoples with 30,000 plus of us in our club that would love to help you out with full-time fishing coaches, the whole kit and caboodle. So if you haven't joined us, go to saltstrong.com. You'll see a place to join risk-free for a whole year. Yep, risk-free for a whole year. And if you are a member, thank you guys. I know a lot of the current members listen to this. We love seeing your comments come in as well. So thank you guys for tuning in these podcasts. If there's anything we can do to help you out, to better serve you, and just to make your life easier to go out there and catch more fish faster, let us know. We literally wake up thinking about ways to help our members out. That's where we put all of our time and emphasis. So appreciate you guys big time. Luke, thank you for sharing that story. That was good.
Absolutely. I'll add one more thing too. So
Yeah.
if anybody's on the fence, just so you know, the feedback has been awesome. We know that this club, including the courses that you get access to, was the foundational knowledge plus the weekend game plans, just the weekly trends. We know it helps. We know it's going to help you out. We know it works. And we have members really from Texas all the way up to Virginia who have just had awesome things to say, where now they just feel the freedom to go out. And even if they only have a 2 or 3 hour window of fishing, even if they're out on travel somewhere they've never been before, they can go out with a select few lures that we talked about and that we recommend in the club based on the conditions, of course, and consistently catch fish. And it's to the point where we're now offering a 200% satisfaction guarantee, where if you get in there and you go through the year, sign up for the annual plan, you have an entire year to make sure it's awesome. And if you don't think it's the absolute best thing you've ever done as far as investing in your fishing knowledge that you can use yourself and pass down for generations, just let us know. We'll refund you the entire amount you paid. Plus we'll send you twice that. So it's $97 a year. Currently it'll be going up later this year. And so we'll literally double it because we put our money where our mouth is. It really will help. It's something that I wish was available when I was learning the hard way. And I eventually got there. It took many years. This will just be the shortest way and the quickest way to get from where we are now to just really consistently catching inshore slams.
And get some real-time human intelligence. Woo! Yep. All right, guys. Well, saltstrong.com. Join now. Why it's on your mind right now. If you haven't already, you will not be disappointed. Your whole family will thank you. Your friends might not, because you'll be catching more fish than them and wowing them. Like, man, where did you come from? How did you become the fish whisperer? But in all seriousness, it will help you save time and money. That's the guarantee. Hopefully lots of time and lots of money. So hope to see you in there. If you current members, hope to see you back in the community. Come back and get in there. We're adding some cool stuff. And with this whole new smart fishing spots software, holy smokes, wait till you see it. I know you've seen some teasers in the last couple podcasts. It gets better every week. We just keep adding stuff, and it's coming really soon. So it's very, very soon. I'm not going to give a specific date because it's been moved before, because we want to make it right. Like, we want you to get in, and we're going to have some beta testers first, obviously. And if you want to be a beta tester, let us know in the comments. Actually, that's a great place. Let us know in the comments if you want to be a beta tester in your name, and we'll be able to see your email when you leave the comment. So make sure to put that in there, and we'll reach out. Insiders only, of course. If you're not an insider, you can't beta test. One more reason to join us. So thank you, Luke, for sharing, and everyone else. We'll talk to you guys in the next episode. Peace. We out.
Yeah.